It was supposed to be just another night in a town where things stayed the same, a place where the rules didn't apply to everyone equally. But tonight? Tonight was different. Tonight they had no idea that they had just made their last mistake. A black man, mid-50s, strolled down a cracked sidewalk. The dim streetlights buzzed above him, offering little more than a weak, flickering glow. The air was thick with the scent of damp asphalt and distant smoke from a barbecue. But the man wasn't here for the scent or the heat. He had a purpose, and his stride spoke of it. His hands were deep in the pockets of his slacks, his shirt slightly wrinkled from travel, clinging to his back. But his gaze was sharp. To anyone watching, he looked like just another lone traveler, making his way through a quiet town. But those watching didn't know who he was. They didn't know the power he held or the storm he was about to unleash. Behind him, 2 patrol officers were lounging in their car, the dull hum of the engine the only sound breaking the silence. They didn't think much of him at first, just another man walking alone at night. Jenkins, a burly mid-40s officer, leaned back in his seat, staring out the window. "Carter," he said, a slight edge of amusement in his voice. "You ever seen one of them just walking like they own the place?" Carter, the rookie, hesitated. He was new to this town, still trying to figure out how things worked around here. He glanced at the man, unsure, not entirely comfortable with Jenkins' tone. "No, but maybe he's just walking?" Jenkins scoffed. "Just walking?" He gave Carter a sidelong glance, tapping his fingers on the dashboard. "Come on, kid, this is our town. He's not just walking. Let's have a little fun." Carter swallowed hard, unsure. The air in the car suddenly felt thicker. It wasn't that he didn't trust Jenkins. It was just something felt off. But he didn't question it. Not yet. The patrol car slowly shifted into drive, the tires crunching against the gravel as they rolled forward. The headlights cast long shadows over the sidewalk, and the man walking ahead picked up his pace, sensing something behind him. But he didn't turn around. He didn't break his stride. Inside the car, Jenkins watched him carefully, his lips curling into a grin. "Watch this. He thinks he's too good to acknowledge us." He nudged Carter, his eyes still locked on the man. "Let's go say hello." The siren blared, sharp and sudden, the flash of red and blue illuminating the street. The man didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He just stopped, his shoulders set, his face unreadable. Jenkins smirked as he stepped out of the car, pulling his belt tight. He glanced back at Carter. "You coming?" Carter didn't move right away. Something in his gut told him this wasn't right. But Jenkins was already walking toward the man, and he couldn't back out now. Jenkins stepped up to the man, sizing him up. "What's a guy like you doing out here at this hour?" he asked, his voice low and mocking. The man didn't answer. He just looked at Jenkins, calm, controlled, unbothered. Jenkins raised an eyebrow. "What? No words? Just gonna stand there like you don't have anything to say?" The man exhaled slowly, as if he had already heard it all before. He didn't flinch, didn't give in. Jenkins sneered. "You think you're somebody, huh?" Still, the man didn't answer. Frustration crept into Jenkins' voice. "What's the matter with you? You think you're above talking to us?" He stepped closer, closing the distance. The man stood firm. Jenkins's jaw clenched. "Turn around." The man didn't move. "I said turn around." The command was cold, final, but the man still didn't budge. It wasn't the kind of response Jenkins was used to. He was used to people cowering, apologizing, shrinking under his authority. But this man, he wasn't backing down. With a sudden motion, Jenkins reached for his zip ties. He wasn't asking. He wasn't negotiating. This wasn't a conversation anymore. The man didn't resist when Jenkins grabbed his wrists, didn't fight when the zip ties dug into his skin. His eyes were steady, calculating. "Carter," Jenkins said, a grin creeping across his face. "Help me out here." Reluctantly, Carter got out of the car. He could feel his stomach twisting as he helped Jenkins push the man toward the abandoned lot. The man didn't fight back. His posture was calm. But Carter could see the tension in his jaw, the quiet defiance in his eyes. Together, they pushed him to a metal pole. They secured his wrists, the plastic biting into his skin. Jenkins took a step back, admiring his work. He pulled out his phone, aiming it at the man. "Smile for the department," he said, snapping a photo. The man didn't react. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He didn't scream. He just stood there, silent. Jenkins chuckled. "What's the matter? Ain't got much to say now, huh?" But even as he laughed, there was a creeping feeling in his gut. Something wasn't right. After a moment, Jenkins turned to Carter. "You think we leave him here? Let him think about his choices." But Carter was no longer laughing. He wasn't even sure if he should be here. Something about this felt wrong. Jenkins, oblivious, headed back to the patrol car, still grinning. Carter hesitated for a moment longer before following him. As the patrol car pulled away, the man remained silent, his wrists still bound to the pole. His face was calm, his eyes were steady, and the two officers had no idea what was coming. By sunrise, the police station would buzz with activity. But this time, there would be no laughter, no jokes, no smug confidence, just silence. Because the man they left tied to a pole was no ordinary man. He was the new chief of police. And by the time they realized what they had done, it was already too late. By the time the sun had risen, the quiet streets of the town seemed eerily calm. It was a slow morning. But for those who lived here, the usual routine felt disrupted, almost like an impending storm was hanging in the air. And it wasn't just the patrol officers who felt it. Everyone who had been around last night sensed that something was about to unravel, and it wasn't going to be pretty. Carter woke up with a strange weight on his chest, as if the events of the previous night had already haunted his dreams. He tried to shake it off, convinced that it was just part of the job. After all, he was still a rookie, and rookies had to pay their dues. But what had happened? Was it truly just another stop, or had they crossed a line? When he arrived at the precinct, the air inside the station was thick with the smell of stale coffee, the kind that no one really drank, but everyone pretended to. Jenkins was already at his desk, his fingers moving over the keyboard as he reviewed some reports. He hadn't given the incident much thought, it seemed, but Carter couldn't stop thinking about it. The man, his silence, the way Jenkins had handled Haim, everything felt wrong. "Hey, Jenkins," Carter said, trying to sound casual, but his voice trembled slightly, betraying the tension that still clung to him. "Yeah, Carter?" Jenkins didn't even look up from his screen. "I've been thinking about last night, about that guy." Carter hesitated before continuing. "Do you think maybe we went too far?" Jenkins finally turned to face him, his expression unreadable. He folded his arms and leaned back in his chair, letting out a chuckle. "Too far? Kid, we did our job. It's not like he's anyone special. But that guy, he wasn't acting like the others. He didn't beg or show fear." Carter's voice dropped lower, his hands nervously twisting together. "I don't know, something about it didn't sit right with me." Jenkins' smile faded slightly. "Carter, you're overthinking this. He was just some guy on the street. People like that always put on an act. They want to make you think they're tougher than they are. You've got to learn to deal with it." He paused, then added in a tone that bordered on dismissive, "You'll get used to it. In this town, that kind of thing happens all the time." Carter stared at his partner, the unease growing inside him. He wasn't sure why he couldn't let go of the feeling that something big had just shifted. But just as he opened his mouth to respond, the door to the precinct slammed open. It was a man in a sharp suit, his tie straight and pressed, his face stern and set. Carter didn't recognize him immediately, but Jenkins seemed to. His expression froze, his eyes flicking from the man's face to the badge hanging on his chest. "Uh-oh," Jenkins muttered under his breath. The man approached them without saying a word. His footsteps were deliberate, each one echoing in the otherwise quiet room. When he reached their desk, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You two?" he said, his voice low and commanding. "What the hell happened last night?" Carter's heart skipped a beat. He exchanged a look with Jenkins, who was now standing straighter than Carter had ever seen him. "Sir," Jenkins said, clearing his throat, "we did what needed to be done." "We?" The man cut him off with a sharp gesture. "You're going to tell me exactly what happened. Now." Carter watched as Jenkins' usual bravado faltered. The man wasn't just any officer. He was an investigatorial lieutenant from another precinct, known for his unyielding nature and his connections to high-ranking officials. Carter had heard rumors about him, how he could make or break careers with a single look. "Sir," Carter spoke up, his voice more steady than he felt, "we stopped a man last night. He wasn't behaving like someone we usually encounter. He hesitated, unsure how to phrase what he felt. There was something off about the situation. I don't know if it was right to treat him like that. The lieutenant's eyes shifted to Carter. For a second, it felt like the room was spinning, but then the man's expression softened, just slightly. "You're right to be worried," the lieutenant said, his tone suddenly more serious. "The man you stopped last night is no ordinary citizen." Carter and Jenkins exchanged a confused look. Jenkins shook his head. "What do you mean? He was just a guy out walking." The lieutenant slammed a folder onto their desk, the loud thud causing Carter to jump. "This man," he said, his voice colder now, "is the new chief of police. He was being monitored in a way. Undercover, actually." Carter felt his stomach drop. "What?" Jenkins was silent now, his face ashen. The air around them had shifted once again, and this time, it wasn't a feeling. It was a fact. "Did you do a background check on him?" the lieutenant asked, looking directly at Jenkins. Jenkins swallowed hard. "No, we didn't." "You didn't? You just stopped him?" The lieutenant's gaze hardened. "You two have no idea what you've done." Suddenly, everything felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in on Carter. He tried to breathe through the panic rising in his chest, but it was impossible. The pieces were falling into place, and none of them made any sense. Why would the chief of police be walking around alone at that hour? Why had they not recognized him? The lieutenant continued. "The chief of police was undercover for a reason. We've been trying to track a corrupt officer for months now. Someone who's been sabotaging investigations and feeding information to the wrong people. Your little stunt last night? You just set us back months." Jenkins' face was pale now, his mouth dry. "But sir, we had no idea." "No idea?" The lieutenant shook his head in disbelief. "You should have known better. That man has connections you can't even imagine. And now, we've got a mess to clean up. You've put this entire investigation at risk." Carter could feel the tension escalating in the room. His mind was racing, trying to process everything. They had made a terrible mistake, but it wasn't just about the chief. It was about the people who had been pulling strings from behind-the-scenes people who had manipulated the situation to their advantage. The lieutenant's words were a blur in Carter's ears, but one thing stuck. "We need to fix this, and fast." It was clear now. They had done something they couldn't take back, something that was going to have consequences far beyond what they had originally thought. "Get it together," the lieutenant barked at them. "We've got a lot of work ahead, and I'm going to need you two to clean up this mess." The weight of the situation pressed down on Carter as they left the station. His heart was heavy, and his thoughts swirled in a chaotic storm. What had they really uncovered? What was the chief involved in? And how far did the corruption go? All he knew now was that things were about to get a whole lot more complicated, and this was only the beginning. The stillness in the air was shattered by the harsh beep of the station's intercom. Carter didn't need to hear the voice on the other end to know something was wrong. The morning had started off like any other, with the usual hum of idle chatter in the precinct. But that was quickly forgotten as the loudspeaker crackled again, now with an urgency in the voice of the dispatcher. "Emergency meeting. Conference room. Now." Carter froze, his heart beating in his chest. He exchanged a look with Jenkins, who was still scrolling through his phone with an air of nonchalance, as if nothing had changed. But Carter could feel it. The change was coming, and it was going to hit them harder than they expected. The department filed into the conference room, and the murmur of low voices stopped as the door creaked open. There, in the doorway, stood a man that none of them expected to see this soon: Malcolm Price, the new chief of police. Carter's breath caught in his throat. There was no mistaking it. The man who had been humiliated just hours ago, the one they had mocked and left to suffer in the dark, was now the one in charge. Malcolm Price's calm, measured gaze swept over the room as he stepped forward. The tension in the air was thick, oppressive, suffocating. The other officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, trying to avoid his gaze. But Carter couldn't look away. Price's eyes found him, locking onto his in a way that made Carter's stomach twist. "Let's talk about last night." Price's voice was steady, but it carried weight, a presence that commanded respect. For the first time since the incident, Carter felt his knees weaken. The realization of what they had done began to sink in. The room was silent. No one dared to speak, the atmosphere now heavy with uncertainty. Jenkins, trying to appear unfazed, took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair, clearly rattled but attempting to maintain control. He didn't want to show weakness, but the sweat on his forehead told a different story. Chief Price continued, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Last night, 2 of my officers decided it was appropriate to take a man, detain him without cause, and zip-tie him to a pole like an animal. No arrest, no charge, just unchecked power. The room stiffened. Carter could feel the weight of each word land on him like a hammer. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably, wiping his palms on his pants, trying to suppress the growing sense of dread. Price didn't allow any interruptions. Instead, he pulled out his phone, tapping the screen with a calm precision. He turned the phone around and showed the officers the image that they had thought would never see the light of day. The picture was clear. The man they had left tied to a pole, humiliated, powerless. Carter's heart dropped. Jenkins' bravado evaporated as the image spread across the room, exposing their actions to the entire department. Price's voice became more deliberate, more powerful. This is the picture. The one you took, Jenkins. The one you thought would never be seen outside of your little joke. But it's here now, and it's staring every one of you in the face. Jenkins swallowed hard, but no words came. The image spoke for itself. His arrogance and confidence had melted away in an instant, leaving behind nothing but the raw truth of what he had done. Price looked around the room, his gaze landing on a few officers who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. What these officers didn't know, Price continued, was that the man they humiliated was me. Carter's breath caught. He could feel his entire body freeze, his eyes widening in disbelief. The realization hit him like a wave. The man they had taunted and degraded, the one they had thought to be insignificant, was their new chief. And now, he was standing right in front of them, calm and unshaken by the injustice that had just occurred. There was no way to escape it now. Carter's pulse quickened, his face flushed with shame. The department's facade of strength and order began to crumble before his eyes. Price wasn't just here to take over the position. He was here to expose the ugly truth lurking in the heart of the department. The tension was unbearable as Price allowed the silence to hang in the air, giving everyone a moment to let the reality of the situation sink in. He could see the guilt on Carter's face, the confusion and dread clouding his eyes. But it wasn't just Carter who was feeling it. Jenkins, the so-called veteran of the department, looked like a man who had been caught in the worst way possible. Price wasn't finished. I walked into this town knowing exactly what kind of place this is. I wanted to see it for myself, to experience it firsthand. Thanks to you two, I got my answer. The kind of men you are, the kind of department this has been. The words stung, a harsh reality that Carter couldn't ignore. There was no turning back now. The wrongs they had committed were laid bare, and the consequences were about to unfold in ways they couldn't have imagined. But even as the room simmered with tension, Price remained calm, his control over the situation undeniable. He was in charge now, and everyone in the room knew it. There would be no sweeping this under the rug, no ignoring what had happened. Carter knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The consequences of their actions were just starting to unfold, and as much as he wanted to believe it would blow over, there was no escaping the weight of his choices. As Price's gaze shifted toward Jenkins, the older officer could no longer hide behind his bravado. The time for games was over. The time for reckoning had come. The power that Jenkins had once abused was now in the hands of a man who wouldn't let it go unchecked. Jenkins knew that too, and for the first time in his career, he felt truly afraid. Price finally spoke again, his voice low but clear. This is how it ends. Not with fire and brimstone, but with accountability. I'm here to clean house, and it starts with you two. The words were final, like a sentence being passed. And as Carter sat there, in that charged silence, he couldn't help but wonder if he had already chosen the path he would walk. Would he stand with the truth, or would he follow the man who had once led him astray? The answer was coming soon. Carter sat there, his hands trembling, his mind racing, as the weight of Chief Price's words sank deeper into his bones. The room, once filled with the mundane sounds of a precinct's daily routine, now felt like a tomb. His heart thudded against his ribcage like a drumbeat. as if urging him to make a choice, one that could change everything. Malcolm Price's gaze was unrelenting. He wasn't just the chief of police anymore. He was the embodiment of everything Carter had come to loathe about power, yet now it seemed like the only thing that could save them. "I'm not here to punish you for what you did," Price said, his tone icy, precise. "I'm here to ensure you understand the consequences for your actions, for what you've allowed to happen under your watch." The words were like a final verdict tone that had been building since the moment Carter and Jenkins had thought it was safe to break the rules, to cross the line they should never have crossed. They had been bold in their cruelty, sure that their position would protect them, that their actions would be swept under the rug as so many others had been. But they had underestimated the storm that Malcolm Price was about to unleash. Price looked around at the room full of officers. Some faces were grim, others nervous, but all were now awake to the reality of their situation. Carter could see it in their eyes, the fear, the unease. For the first time, they were confronted with the truth. This was no longer just about a few bad decisions. It was about the deep rot that had settled into the very core of the department. The things they had allowed to fester, the silent complicity they had indulged in for years. Price let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer, then took a deliberate step forward. "You'll understand," he said, his voice almost soft, "why I couldn't let this go. Why I couldn't let you continue thinking this was acceptable. Because what you did wasn't just wrong, it was a betrayal of everything this department is supposed to stand for." Carter shifted uncomfortably in his seat, feeling the room close in around him. He could hear the faint rustling of papers, the creak of chairs shifting under the weight of tension. He wanted to speak, to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. How could they? What defense could he offer for his actions? What could possibly make this right? Price continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's not just about the law. It's about integrity, accountability, the trust the community places in us. We're supposed to be the ones they turn to when they need help, when they need justice. And you?" He looked directly at Jenkins now. "You made a joke of that. You took a man's dignity and shattered it. You made us all look like fools." Jenkins, who had been sitting silently for the past few minutes, suddenly slumped in his chair. The bravado he had clung to in the face of Price's arrival had evaporated, leaving behind only the ghost of the man he had once been, a man whose ego had once been too big for his own good. "What do you want from us?" Jenkins finally croaked, his voice thick with the guilt he couldn't shake. Price's gaze was unwavering. "What I want from you is simple: accountability." The room held its breath. Price turned to the officers at the back of the room. "This department has been built on lies and silence for too long. What happened last night wasn't a random incident. It wasn't an anomaly. It was the symptom of a larger issue that has gone unchecked for too many years." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But that ends today." Carter felt the weight of those words settle on his chest, pressing down on him. The truth was undeniable now. They weren't just accountable for one incident. They were accountable for everything. For the small moments of compromise, for the times they had ignored the signs of corruption, for the times they had justified actions they knew were wrong. Price's eyes shifted back to Carter, and the young officer could feel a fire growing in his chest, a fire he had been suppressing for too long. His mind raced, searching for a way out, a way to undo the wrongs they had committed. But deep down he knew there was no going back. The only thing left to do was face the consequences. "You're not just facing an investigation," Price continued, his words like a hammer falling onto the table. "You're facing a reckoning. This isn't about punishment for the sake of punishment. It's about making sure we never let this happen again." Carter swallowed hard. He was terrified. But in the pit of his stomach, something else stirred. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Guilt, yes, but also a sense of relief. The relief wasn't because he thought the consequences wouldn't be dire. No, the relief was in the realization that the truth had finally come to light, that there was no more hiding, that finally someone had the courage to expose the darkness that had been allowed to fester for too long. And perhaps, just perhaps, this was the chance for things to change. Malcolm Price was more than just the chief now. He was the agent of change they had all been avoiding. He was the one who would make them face the truth, whether they liked it or not. As the meeting came to an end, Carter stood up from his chair, his mind swirling with thoughts of what would come next. He looked at Jenkins, who avoided his gaze, then turned to face Price. "Do what you have to," Carter said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But know this, I didn't sign up for this, not the way it's been." Price nodded once, acknowledging the truth in Carter's words. "We all make choices, Carter, and sometimes the hardest choice is to face the truth. This department has a long road ahead of it, but I'm willing to walk it." The silence that followed was thick with the promise of change. A change that would take time, but one that was already set in motion. The reckoning had arrived, and this time, there would be no turning back. As Carter left the conference room, his heart was heavy. The air felt different, now charged with uncertainty and a strange kind of hope. He couldn't predict the future, couldn't know how this would all end. But one thing was certain. The truth had finally been exposed, and in the harsh light of day, nothing could ever be the same again. The final reckoning had begun, and with it, the department would either crumble under the weight of its own corruption or rise from the ashes stronger, more accountable, and ready to reclaim its honor. Only time would tell.